This is Tim Tucker, AE6LX from the Worldwide Radio Forum. Today we're going to be discussing a couple of interesting products, the W2IHY 8-band equalizer and noise gate and the W2IHY EQPlus. The first thing I'd like to discuss is the backside of both the 8-band EQ and the EQPlus. On the 8-band EQ, you have your choice of 3 microphone inputs: a standard XLR, an 8-pin mic that is similar to most of the ICOM, Kenwood, Yaesu, etc. type of radios, and an old style phono connector. There's also a push to talk connector if you want to foot key it or use some other type of keying device. When you use this particular mic connector, you need to select which type of rig you have, ICOM, Kenwood, or Yaesu. If you're not using one of these three, like an Elenco device, for example, or a different type of rig, you would choose the one that matches the pinout configuration, or just use a standard XLR microphone. On this side, you have your outputs, power, and monitor headphone connector. 2 microphone outs. If you have 2 different rigs, you can select between the rigs. On the bottom here on the EQPlus, the configuration is a little bit different. In this case, I've run the microphone into the mic in on the 8-band EQ, and then we have a jumper going from the mic out to the auxiliary input of the EQPlus. If you're using the EQPlus as a standalone device, obviously the microphone would just be in here, and you'd use one of these outputs. So the first thing I'll point out is on this device you have 3 output devices that you can choose from. 1, 2, 3, so that could be 3 different rigs, recording device, whatever you wanted to do. Same deal on this with the microphone connector. On the mic in on this 8-pin, you need to select whether it's the Yaesu, Kenwood, or ICOM. You also have the old style mic in and the push to talk. Here are the 2 power outlets that go down to the wall wart.
The first thing we're going to discuss is the 8-band equalizer function on here. Before we get started on that, I'd like to point out that I'm using a Heil Goldline GM5 mic on the wide setting. It's a good mic, has good directivity so that you don't hear a lot of the artifacts behind the microphone. But as we'll be able to see as we go through this, some improvements for my particular voice qualities can be made with this equipment. So the first thing I'd like to do is go ahead and switch the audio on for the 8-band EQ. Now when we do this, you can immediately hear some changes. I tend to have a little bit of a deep voice, so I brought up some of the audio while maintaining some of the bass and the middle. To me, this gives a little bit fuller, richer, rounder sound, which I like a little bit better. There's a couple of different ways that you can go about setting the audio properties on this device. What some people do is set everything in neutral and then raise and lower each band until they find what they like and remove the sounds that they don't like. The other way you can do it is you can start it in a V form. The reason for that is when you're all said and done, most people's voices tend to end up in somewhat of a V fashion, so you're kind of presetting it to where you might end up. You can see kind of the way my voice ended up to where I like it to sound with my rig and with this microphone. Next, we're going to look at the noise gate. Now, what the noise gate does is it eliminates background noise. Now, I'm going to demonstrate this by turning on my amplifier down here below, which has a very loud fan. Okay, you should be able to hear the fan now. As I switch on this noise gate, you'll be able to tell that as I'm talking, the gate opens up and allows my voice to go through, but in between words, the gate closes, eliminating the background noise between syllables and between words. The trick to this is setting both the delay of the gate, how long it takes to open and close, and the level at which it responds to audio. So if I set this too low, so you see in that case I was talking but it never came on. If I set it too high, it never turns off. So the trick to this is finding right where it turns off with the background noise, So now you can see it turns off with the background noise, and then adjusting the level, adjusting the delay so there's not too much of a time lag in between talking and turning on. So you can see now I've got it a little bit off. There you go, right about there is perfect. So now we're going to move on to the EQPlus. I still have the 8-band equalizer turned on in the background. The first two things I'd like to point out on the EQPlus are the mic gain and the output level settings. The mic gain does just exactly what you would expect it to. It sets the amount of gain that it picks up from the mic, and you're going to have to set this to something that is comfortable with the particular mic you're using. With this particular gold line mic, it doesn't pick up a whole lot of the background noise, but it is pretty sensitive and it's pretty hot. I also like to talk very close to the mic, so I don't turn this up very much at all, just enough to pick up my audio. The output level regulates how much audio is sent out to drive the rig. Where you want to set this is enough audio to where it makes your rig happy, but not so much that when you increase your volume level or articulate T's and P's and things like that, that it makes popping noises. You'll find what makes your rig happy by adjusting this, watching the drive level, listening to yourself on your rig, and also listening to other folks' comments. This is really important because, like I said, it really helps regulate the amount of audio that's going in there under a lot of extreme circumstances where you might be laughing, sneezing, yelling, coughing, getting excited on the mic. For the audio purpose demonstration of what we're doing today, this output level has no effect because what we're really doing is we're listening through the monitor level, which is only controlled by me turning this. And I will have to adjust this as we're going through some of these demonstrations. So let's go back over here to this side of the EQPlus. The first thing you'll notice over here is there's additional 2-band equalizer. If you're using this as a standalone device, you can tailor your audio quality much like the 8-band EQ did, but just on 2 bands. When you're using it in conjunction with another equalizer like an 8-band EQ from W2IHY or another one, then this is simply used to just tailor your audio ever so slightly to kind of get it where you want it to be. So I have some preset settings where I set it here, and what I'm going to go ahead and do is turn this on. Now you can hear that what I've done is I've brought up a little more treble, I left the bass neutral. You can achieve probably very similar or the same results by adjusting the 8-band EQ, but the way I do it and the way I usually do it is I get it pretty close to where I want it to be with the 8-band EQ, and then I just use this to fine-tune it. Down here you will notice that there are various settings for the type of mic you're using. So these set the impedance level of the input mic, 600 ohm, 200 ohm, a high impedance mic. Most of the modern rigs, the input is a 600 ohm mic. And also whether or not the mic you're using needs power, like some of the ICOM rigs need a power mic or supply power to the mic. This simulates that. Now we'll move over to this side of the EQPlus. These are some really neat settings that we have here, the compression and downward expander. Compression does exactly what you would expect it to do. It adds compression to the audio. Some people say or liken that to giving the punch on sideband. This downward expander helps eliminate background noise. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this on. And the first thing you'll notice is the audio came way up on the input there. I'm going to have to turn the monitor level, back down a little bit to compensate for that. But as I turn this down up, you can hear no compression. And then as I'm talking, I'll bring the compression up, and you can hear how it increases the overall average power output from the audio chain. The EQPlus does have a limiter, and this little red light will go on over here if you are overdriving and giving it too much compression. So it's almost foolproof, but not quite. You can see as I turn it up here, it'll start kicking in the limiter. It won't let any more than a certain level through. I find that you have to be a little bit careful with it, and you want to kind of find the sweet spot to where it sounds good. Now, to demonstrate the properties of the downward expander, I'm going to go ahead and turn the amplifier back on. Give it a second here for the fan to kick up. So I've turned the downward expander all the way off, and you should be able to hear plenty of background fan noise from this amplifier, which is fairly noisy. What I'll do is I'll slowly turn this up, and as I do, you'll start to hear the background amplifier noise fade away. It's almost gone. You can turn it up to a point here where it's gone completely. Now the difference between the downward expander and the noise gate on the 8-band EQ is that this works while you're talking and while you're silent. So you can hear I've pretty much eliminated all the background noise. You have to be a little bit careful with the downward expander. If you turn it up too much, it will distort your audio a little bit. But as you're adjusting it, you can find that sweet spot to where the background noise is gone and your audio still sounds good. When you don't have that much audio, I like to turn it back down a little bit just to get rid of some of the ambient noise, kids in the background, dogs barking, etc. But I don't like to leave it all the way up like this, just to eliminate some of the distortion. The last interesting feature of the EQPlus is the effects processor. Now on this effects processor is kind of like a reverb or echo. What you can do is when you turn this on, you can adjust the amount of delay on the echo and the amount of the level. So to explain it a little bit differently, when we turn this into the 1 position, it adds the equivalent of sound bouncing once off a solid surface. The delay increases the amount of delay in the echo that you'll hear. You can turn it all the way up and you can probably really hear it now. This increases the volume of that delay. So now we've gone to obscene, ridiculous level. So I'll turn it back down. You can play around with this and kind of get it to what you think you want to sound like. I find it a little bit obnoxious. This particular room that I'm in is a very live room, and it has hard floors, hard walls, hard ceiling. I don't usually use the effects processor because I have plenty of reverb in this room. The number 2 position makes it so that the audio sounds like it's bouncing multiple times off the surface. So I'll bring this back up so you can kind of hear the difference, and you should be able to hear it about now. You can tell quickly that you can get crazy with this and it's too much. So if you're going to use this, you're going to want to find a sweet spot in this to where you add just enough reverb. And you're only going to want to really use this if you're kind of in a dead room, to where you just want to add a little bit of not volume but bigness to your sound is one way to describe it. I'm going to go ahead and turn it back off. Now, one last thing I'll talk about with both the 8-band EQ and the EQPlus is how you need to set this up to drive your rig. With my particular setup, I'm driving an ICOM 746 Pro. I actually turn the mic gain to about 11 o'clock on here. Seems to work pretty good. This output level is right about where I keep it set to regulate the amount of audio going into the rig. I actually turned the compression on the 746 Pro on sideband. With the combination of this equipment and this mic, the compression on the 746 Pro really only acts like a preamp. And I leave the bass and treble settings on the 746 Pro at neutral, and I control all of it with this equipment here. Now that may work for you, it may not. You're going to have to monitor your audio on the rig that you're using, and after you get this set the way you think it sounds good, and then make some slight adjustments on your rig. Actually, on the 746 Pro, when I operate on AM, I find that I have to reduce the amount of AM on the 746 Pro because it sounds a little bit muddy. I could compensate for that by adjusting the bass here or adjusting the EQ, but rather than do that, I'd like to get this set where I want it, leave it alone. And since the 746 Pro has separate settings for sideband, FM, and AM, I can set the AM to where it sounds and is good and is happy with these settings, the FM to where it's good and is happy with these settings, and the sideband where it's good and happy with these settings, and leave it alone. You do have to be a little bit careful using compression on sideband versus AM, and definitely on FM. You're going to want to really be very careful with that, if not leave it off completely. Lastly, I'd like to talk about putting it all together. As you heard as we activate each function on the various components, they each change the audio characteristics in their own way. When you're going through and setting this up, you should set up the first component, get that sounding the way you like it, add the second component to tweak it, add the compression, add the downward expansion, and then go back and make changes to each of the previous components until you get it tailored the way you like it. This is part of the normal setup process, and you have to take it forward to the settings on your rig as well. So I'm using an ICOM 746 Pro. It has its own built-in bass and treble and compression settings. On sideband, I find that for my voice with this mic and this audio equipment, if I leave the audio if I leave the bass and treble settings neutral on the 746 Pro and completely control the audio characteristics using this equipment, it comes out pretty good. The compression remains on, but with this mic and this equipment, the compression really only acts like a preamp at that point. On AM, I find that the built-in audio on this particular rig with this mic is a little bit muddy. It's a little too bassy, and I really don't care for the way it sounds. But rather than mess with the audio settings I have here that are set to work really good on sideband, all I had to do was back down the bass settings on the 746 Pro, and I was able to match up the audio quality very closely. Of course, on AM, you have to be a little more careful with the compression. On FM, you have to be extremely careful with it. In fact, you probably shouldn't even run it at all. But the 8-band EQ plus the bass and treble settings on here, and tweaking this slightly to kind of make it all play nice together, is a normal setup process. It takes a little bit of a trial and error, but if you get somebody to help record you on the air, monitor your audio settings through the monitor functions on the rig, I think you'll find that you'll be able to get it all set up so that you'll be very happy with the audio quality settings of your station. Now, one final thought before I close. I've demonstrated the audio using a pretty high quality mic, the Heil Goldline GM5, as I mentioned. You can really use this equipment with any kind of cheap mic, inexpensive mic, and you will be just absolutely amazed at what it will make that microphone and your voice and your station sound like. So don't be afraid to experiment, try different things, see what works good for you, and have a lot of fun. I hope you've enjoyed this demonstration of the W2IHY 8-band equalizer and EQPlus by W2IHY. This device sells for approximately $250. The EQPlus sells for about $350. For more information, check their websites at www.w2ihy.com. For more product reviews and for more help for all things ham radio, please visit the Worldwide Radio Forum at www.worldwidedx.com.